What would you do if you discovered that the peaceful cemetery in your hometown had been hiding a secret so disturbing that it could unravel the very fabric of your community? Have you ever wondered what dark truths lie beneath the weathered gravestones and perfectly manicured lawns where generations of your ancestors rest? In the fall of 1903, as maple leaves turned crimson across the Michigan landscape, a simple ledger discovered in the basement of the Oakwood Township Hall would spark an investigation that continues to haunt the small community of Millfield to this day. The discovery was made on October 12, 1903, when Township Clerk Harold Whitman was tasked with organizing decades of municipal records that had been haphazardly stored in the damp basement of the town hall. What began as a mundane administrative task would soon evolve into one of Michigan's most disturbing unsolved cases, one that would remain buried for over a century until chance and circumstance conspired to bring it back to light. "I remember that day clearly, despite the many years that have passed," wrote Whitman in his personal journal, recovered from his granddaughter's attic in 1968. The basement had that peculiar smell of mildew and old paper, and the single electric bulb cast more shadows than light. I had been working for hours when I noticed a peculiar leather-bound book wedged between the wall and an old filing cabinet. It was covered in dust, as if it had been deliberately hidden and forgotten. When I opened it, I knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. The names didn't match. Nothing matched. The ledger in question was the cemetery record book for Millfield's Oakwood Cemetery, established when the town was founded in 1837. What alarmed Whitman was a disturbing discrepancy between the official burial records and this hidden ledger. According to township historians, this secondary record contained not only different names, but different causes of death, different burial locations, and in some cases, multiple entries for the same plot. County records indicate that Whitman brought his discovery to the attention of Sheriff Thomas Blackwood the following morning. Blackwood, a decorated veteran of the Spanish-American War who had been elected sheriff just 6 months prior, documented the meeting in his official log. October 13, 1903, met with H. Whitman regarding cemetery records, possible clerical errors or fraud. Investigation to commence immediately. What began as a potential case of administrative misconduct quickly evolved into something far more sinister. Sheriff Blackwood assembled a small team consisting of himself, Deputy James Cooper, and Dr. Elijah Sinclair, the county medical examiner, to investigate the discrepancies. Their first step was to compare the official cemetery map with the actual layout of graves at Oakwood. On the morning of October 15, 1903, the three men arrived at Oakwood Cemetery, armed with the official records, the mysterious ledger, and surveying equipment. The cemetery, situated on a gentle hill overlooking the Millfield River, was shrouded in early morning mist as they began their work. The air was still that morning, unusually so, Deputy Cooper later recounted in his statement to the Michigan State Police. No birds singing, no wind in the trees, just silence and that damned fog clinging to the ground like it was hiding something. The sheriff was methodical, marking each plot and checking it against both sets of records. It wasn't until we reached the north section, the oldest part of the cemetery, that we found the first inconsistency. According to Cooper's account, the first discrepancy they discovered was a grave marker for Elizabeth Harmon, beloved wife and mother, 1850-1899. The official cemetery records listed this plot as belonging to Elizabeth Harmon, who had died of tuberculosis. However, the hidden ledger contained a different entry for this location. Female, approximately 30 years of age, unidentified, severe trauma to skull and neck, discovered Miller's Creek, June 17, 1899. By midday, the investigation had uncovered 17 similar discrepancies, all in the northern section of the cemetery. In each case, the hidden ledger described unidentified individuals, unusual causes of death, or bodies discovered under suspicious circumstances, while the official records showed respectable citizens who had died of natural causes. Dr. Sinclair, whose medical training had included study at the prestigious Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, suggested the only way to resolve the discrepancies was to exhume at least one of the graves. After obtaining a court order from Judge William Preston, the team returned to Oakwood Cemetery on October 17th to exhume the grave of Elizabeth Harmon. "What we found beneath that headstone will haunt me until my dying day," wrote Dr. Ray Sinclair in his medical journal, a document that remained sealed in the county archives until 2022. The casket contained the remains of a female, but one whose injuries were inconsistent with death by tuberculosis as officially recorded. The skull showed evidence of multiple fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma. More disturbing were the restraint marks on the wrist bones and evidence of perimortem cutting on the cervical vertebrae. This was no peaceful death from consumption, but a violent end deliberately concealed. Further examination revealed that the woman buried in Elizabeth Harmon's grave was not Elizabeth Harmon at all. Dental records obtained from Dr. Morton Wells, who had treated the real Elizabeth Harmon for years, confirmed the discrepancy. The body in the grave was a stranger, an unidentified victim of violence who had been given a respectable citizen's identity in death. As news of the exhumation spread through Millfield, a pall of fear and suspicion descended upon the community. Sheriff Blackwood, recognizing the potential for panic, attempted to keep the investigation as quiet as possible, but in a town of just over 2,000 souls, secrets were difficult to maintain. The investigation took an even darker turn when Sheriff Blackwood and his team began researching the history of those responsible for maintaining the cemetery records. From 1885 until 1901, Oakwood Cemetery had been under the care of caretaker Franklin Pierce and town mortician Walter Simmons. Both men had been respected members of the community, with Pierce serving as a deacon at the First Baptist Church and Simmons operating the only funeral home in the county. What troubled investigators was the discovery that both men had abruptly left Millfield in early 1902, supposedly to seek opportunities in Detroit. However, inquiries to authorities in Detroit revealed no record of either man ever arriving or establishing residence there. I find it highly suspicious that both individuals responsible for the cemetery departed so suddenly and without apparent reason, Sheriff Blackwood wrote in his case notes dated October 23rd. Mr. Pierce left behind a comfortable home and position of respect in the church. Mr. Simmons abandoned a profitable business that had been in his family for 2 generations. Their simultaneous disappearance, coming just months before the discovery of these falsified records, cannot be mere coincidence. The investigation broadened to include a review of all deaths and burials in Millfield between 1885 and 1902, the period when Pierce and Simmons had overseen the cemetery. The results were disturbing. Of the 173 burials during this period, the hidden ledger suggested that 42 contained discrepancies similar to Elizabeth Harmon's grave. Even more troubling was a pattern that emerged when Deputy Cooper plotted the locations of these suspicious graves on the cemetery map. The 42 graves formed a rough circle around a central point in the north section, a plot that, according to official records, remained empty and reserved for future use. On October 25th, Sheriff Blackwood obtained a second court order to examine this central plot. What they discovered there would forever alter the course of the investigation and the history of Millfield itself. The central plot appeared undisturbed at first glance, Dr. Sinclair recorded. No headstone, no visible sign of burial. However, upon removing the topsoil, we discovered not a conventional grave, but what appeared to be a small chamber constructed of brick and mortar. The chamber, approximately 3 feet square, contained a metal box sealed with an unusual lock-bearing symbols I did not recognize. The box, crafted from copper with strange engravings along its edges, required the skills of Millfield's blacksmith Josiah Turner to open. Inside, investigators found a collection of items that defied immediate explanation. A leather-bound journal written in a cipher, several anatomical drawings depicting human bodies with unusual markings, a set of surgical tools unlike any Dr. Sinclair had encountered in his medical practice, and most disturbing of all, a series of 16 glass vials containing what appeared to be human tissue preserved in solution. The contents of this box represent something beyond my experience or understanding, Dr. Sinclair confessed in his journal. The surgical implements suggest medical training, yet their design serves no therapeutic purpose I can discern. The preserved specimens. I hesitate to speculate on their purpose without further analysis. Sheriff Blackwood immediately dispatched Deputy Cooper to telegraph the state police in Lansing, requesting additional investigators with specialized experience. However, before help could arrive, events in Millfield took an unexpected turn. On the morning of October 27th, residents of Millfield awoke to find the town hall engulfed in flames. Despite the best efforts of the volunteer fire brigade, the building was destroyed, along with most of the records stored within, including the mysterious cemetery ledger. That same morning, Dr. Sinclair failed to appear for a scheduled meeting with Sheriff Blackwood. When deputies visited his home, they found signs of a hasty departure. Clothes missing, personal items gone, but breakfast still laid out on the table as if he had intended to return. I fear our investigation has disturbed something that certain parties wish to remain hidden, Sheriff Blackwood wrote in a telegram to the state police that afternoon. Request immediate assistance. Dr. Sinclair missing, evidence destroyed. Suspect local involvement in obstruction. That evening, as Sheriff Blackwood was returning home after a long day, managing both the investigation and the town hall fire response, he was approached by an elderly woman whom few in Millfield knew well. Agnes Winters had lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of town for as long as most residents could remember. Some claimed she had once been a nurse during the Civil War, while others whispered that she practiced folk medicine and could commune with spirits. Whatever the truth of her past, her words to Sheriff Blackwood that evening would add yet another layer of mystery to the unfolding case. "You've opened something that should have stayed buried, Thomas Blackwood," Winters allegedly told the sheriff, according to his hastily written notes found later. "What Pierce and Simmons did was only part of it. The society has roots that go deeper than you know, deeper than this town, deeper than this state. They've been watching you since you found the book. They're watching you now. They'll come for the box next." When Sheriff Blackwood pressed her for more information about this society, Winters would only say, "They've been here since before Millfield existed. They were here when the first settlers arrived. Why do you think this place was chosen for a town? The land speaks to them here. The ground is thin here. What they put in those graves isn't what you think." Before Sheriff Blackwood could question her further, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, state police investigators arriving from Lansing. By the time the sheriff returned to look for Agnes Winters the next day, her cottage was empty, with no sign of where she might have gone. The arrival of State Police Captain William Harrison and his team marked a turning point in the investigation. Captain Harrison, who had gained notoriety for solving a series of gruesome murders in Kalamazoo the previous year, brought both experience and additional resources to the case. His first action was to secure the copper box and its contents, which were transported under guard to Lansing for analysis by state medical experts. Meanwhile, in Millfield, the atmosphere had transformed from one of curiosity to palpable fear. Many residents reported strange noises in the night, unexplained lights seen among the gravestones of Oakwood Cemetery, and a persistent sense of being watched. Church attendance swelled as citizens sought comfort in faith, while others began to make arrangements to leave town until the investigation concluded. "The town is balanced on a knife's edge," noted local schoolteacher Emma Peterson in her diary, dated October 31st. "Half the children were absent from school today. Their parents are keeping them close, afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows. At night, no one walks the streets alone anymore. We lock our doors now, something many of us never did before." Whatever Sheriff Blackwood and those state policemen found in that cemetery, it's as if it woke something up, something that had been sleeping beneath Millfield all this time. On November 3rd, 1903, Captain Harrison returned to Millfield with disturbing news. The analysis of the copper box's contents had revealed that the preserved tissue samples were indeed human, specifically tissue taken from the brain, heart, liver, and eyes of multiple individuals. More disturbing still, the anatomical drawings appeared to depict some kind of systematic collection of these organs, with specific locations in each body marked for extraction. "The experts in Lansing believe we are dealing with some form of ritualistic behavior," Captain Harrison informed Sheriff Blackwood, according to the meeting transcript. The cipher journal, though only partially decoded, contains references to vessels, essence transfer, and the great work. One recurring phrase appears to be, "Mortem non finem sed initium," death is not the end, but the beginning. We believe Mr. Pierce and Mr. Simmons may have been involved in practices that go beyond simple murder and concealment. As the state police expanded their investigation, they uncovered more connections that extended beyond the borders of Millfield. Records from neighboring counties revealed similar patterns of suspicious deaths, missing persons, and abrupt departures of cemetery caretakers and morticians dating back to the 1850s. In each case, the timeline suggested a period of activity lasting approximately 15 to 20 years before those involved moved on, often leaving falsified records in their wake. We appear to be dealing with an organization that has operated across Michigan for at least 50 years, Captain Harrison concluded. Their activities center around death and burial, with evidence suggesting ritualistic organ harvesting and possible experimentation. The consistent pattern of migration suggests they may abandon an area when risk of exposure grows too high, only to establish themselves elsewhere under new identities. While state police investigators worked to uncover the broader conspiracy, Sheriff Blackwood focused on protecting his community and determining which Millfield residents might be involved. His suspicions soon fell upon several prominent citizens who had served on the cemetery board alongside Pierce and Simmons, including Judge William Preston, who had initially seemed cooperative by granting the exhumation orders. On November 7th, Sheriff Blackwood obtained a warrant to search Judge Preston's home and office. What he discovered there would forever change his understanding of Millfield's history and the extent of the conspiracy that had taken root in his community. Hidden in a secret compartment beneath the judge's desk was correspondence between Preston, Pierce, Simmons, and individuals in 7 other Michigan counties. The letters, written in both conventional English and the same cipher found in the cemetery box, detailed a network called the Eternal Order of the Vessel that had operated throughout the Midwest since 1833. "We have secured 3 suitable vessels this month," read one letter dated June 1897. "S has prepared them according to the prescribed method, and P has ensured appropriate documentation for burial. The conductor will arrive for the extraction on the new moon. Preparations for the chamber are complete." Other documents suggested that the conspiracy extended beyond Michigan, with references to chapters in Illinois, Wisconsin, and as far east as New York. Most disturbing were allusions to a central authority known only as the Architect, who directed the group's activities from an undisclosed location. Sheriff Blackwood immediately attempted to place Judge Preston under arrest, only to discover that the judge had fled sometime during the previous night. A hasty search of other suspected conspirators' homes revealed the same pattern. All had disappeared, taking few belongings, but leaving behind evidence of their involvement in what was now clearly a vast and organized conspiracy. As November wore on, the investigation continued to uncover more disturbing details. Analysis of town records showed that many of the falsified deaths corresponded with reports of strangers or travelers who had passed through Millfield and subsequently disappeared. These individuals, primarily drifters, immigrants, and others unlikely to be missed, appeared to have been the true occupants of the misidentified graves. The methodology is calculated to target those with minimal connections, Captain Harrison noted in his report to the governor. They select victims who are transient, creating false identities for burial that match respected citizens who have either died naturally or relocated. The complexity of this deception and its consistent application across multiple jurisdictions suggests an organization with considerable resources and influence. By mid-November, state investigators had identified 37 members of the Eternal Order across Michigan, including doctors, judges, morticians, and local officials. Most had disappeared before they could be apprehended, seemingly alerted to the investigation by some unseen communication network. Those few who were arrested refused to cooperate, with 2 committing suicide in their cells before they could be questioned. The investigation suffered another setback on November 21st, when the laboratory in Lansing, where the copper box and its contents were being studied, was destroyed in a fire. 2 researchers and a state police guard perished in the blaze, and all evidence recovered from Oakwood Cemetery was lost. Investigators strongly suspected arson, but no suspects were ever identified. As winter descended upon Michigan, the investigation gradually lost momentum. Without the physical evidence, with key suspects vanished, and with increasing pressure from state officials concerned about public panic, Captain Harrison was eventually recalled to Lansing. Sheriff Blackwood continued his efforts locally, but with few resources and diminishing support, he too was forced to scale back the active investigation. "I know they are still out there," Blackwood wrote in his final case notes dated December 18, 1903. "This eternal order has not been destroyed, merely disrupted. They will resurface elsewhere, perhaps under a different name but with the same dark purpose. What that purpose truly is, I cannot say with certainty." The references to vessels and essence transfer suggest beliefs or practices beyond rational explanation. But of this I am certain: they view death not as an end, but as a beginning for whatever terrible work they pursue. The Millfield Cemetery case was officially classified as unresolved in January 1904. In the months that followed, life in the small town gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. New officials were elected, Oakwood Cemetery was placed under county administration, and many residents chose to simply forget the disturbing events of the previous fall. Sheriff Blackwood, however, never abandoned his pursuit of the truth. After losing his bid for re-election in 1906, a defeat many attributed to his continued obsession with the cemetery case, he devoted his remaining years to tracking the movements of the eternal order across the Midwest. His investigations led him to similar cases in Traverse City, Michigan, Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Joliet, Illinois, all bearing the same hallmarks of the Millfield incident. In 1912, Blackwood disappeared while investigating reports of suspicious deaths in a small town in northern Minnesota. His horse and belongings were discovered near an abandoned mining settlement, but no trace of Blackwood himself was ever found. Some speculated that he had finally gotten too close to the truth and had been silenced by those he hunted. Others suggested he had simply succumbed to the elements in the harsh Minnesota winter. For decades, the Millfield Cemetery case faded from public memory, preserved only in sealed state police files and the private journals of those who had experienced it firsthand. The Eternal Order, if it continued to exist, operated with greater secrecy, perhaps chastened by its near exposure in 1903. And then, in October 2022, during renovation work at the Millfield Public Library, formerly the residence of Walter Simmons, workers discovered a hidden space beneath the building's foundation. Inside was a collection of journals, letters, and photographs that would reignite interest in the century-old mystery and suggest that the Eternal Order's activities had not ended with the 1903 investigation. Among the items recovered was a photograph dated 1897, showing 15 men in formal attire standing before a stone altar. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "The vessels are prepared. The great work continues. Have you ever wondered what secrets might be buried in your own hometown? What whispers might still echo through abandoned buildings? What truths might lie hidden in forgotten archives?" The discovery in the Millfield Public Library basement in 2022 sent shockwaves through the community that rippled far beyond the small Michigan town's borders, catching the attention of historians, paranormal researchers, and law enforcement agencies across the Midwest. The collection of documents, preserved in a lead-lined box sealed with the same strange symbols found on the original copper container from 1903, provided disturbing new insights into the activities of the Eternal Order of the vessel and suggested that their work had continued long after the initial investigation had gone cold. Dr. Rebecca Chen, an archival historian from the University of Michigan, who was called in to authenticate the documents, described her first encounter with the collection. "When I opened that box, the air changed. It's difficult to explain to someone who wasn't there, but it was as if the temperature dropped several degrees. The papers inside were in remarkable condition, showing almost no deterioration despite being over a century old. More unsettling was the organizational system. Everything was catalogued with meticulous precision, with cross-references to other documents that weren't present in the collection. It suggested we were looking at only a fragment of a much larger archive. Among the most significant items recovered was a leather-bound journal belonging to Walter Simmons, the mortician who had fled Millfield in 1902. Unlike the ciphered text found in the cemetery box, Simmons's journal was written in plain English, detailing his initiation into the Eternal Order and his subsequent rise through its ranks over a 15-year period. "I was first approached during my apprenticeship in Chicago," Simmons wrote in an entry dated 1887. "Dr. Winters recognized something in me that I had not seen in myself, an understanding that death is not an ending but a transition, a doorway that can be held open with the proper knowledge and tools. What he showed me in the basement of that Chicago hospital cannot be described in words. Suffice to say, I saw a man who had been declared dead speak again, not with his voice, but with the voice of another who had passed 50 years. Prior, subsequent entries chronicled Simmons' training in what he called the sacred art of vessel. Preparation, a process that involved selecting suitable subjects, administering specific compounds to preserve certain organs, and performing ritualistic incisions that he claimed would maintain the connection between vessel and essence. The journal contained detailed anatomical drawings matching those found in the original investigation, with additional notations about optimal extraction points and preservation methods. Most disturbing were Simmons' casual descriptions of how victims were selected and obtained. F. Pierce has proven invaluable in identification of suitable vessels. His position at the church allows him to identify travelers and transients who will not be missed. This month we have processed 4 vessels, 2 drifters seeking farm work, an Italian immigrant separated from his group, and a young woman who unwisely accepted P's offer of employment as a housekeeper. All were properly documented in both ledgers, with appropriate substitutions made in the public record. The journal revealed that the Eternal Order operated through cells of 3 to 7 members in each location, with each cell reporting to a regional conductor, who in turn communicated with the mysterious architect. According to Simmons, members of different cells rarely met except during special ceremonies held at 5-year intervals at locations he referred to only as confluence points. "Today we journeyed to the confluence point near the Great Lake," read an entry from 1895. "There I met brothers and sisters in the work from 7 states, nearly 60 vessels of the order, gathered in one place for the first time in my experience. The conductor from Ohio brought news that the architect is pleased with our progress in Michigan. The vessels we have prepared here possess exceptional resonance, particularly those interred at the northernmost point of the Oakwood site. The alignment with the subterranean current is precise, according to the instruments." The journal ended abruptly in December 1901, with a final entry that suggested Simmons and Pierce had received warning of potential exposure. Message from the conductor today. "We are compromised. The new sheriff is asking questions about the Anderson boys' disappearance that F cannot deflect. We are to enact dissolution protocol immediately. I am to proceed to the secondary location in Minnesota, while F will report to Wisconsin. Judge P will remain to monitor and misdirect as needed. The work continues, though our part in it must shift to new ground." Alongside Simmons's journal were letters exchanged between various members of the Millfield cell and their counterparts in other locations. These communications revealed that the Eternal Order had not merely been collecting organs for some abstract ritual purpose, they had been engaged in something far more complex and horrifying. "The alignment approaches completion," wrote someone identified only as the conductor of the Western Territory, in a letter dated October 1899. With each properly prepared vessel placed at the designated points, the network grows stronger. The architect confirms that 5 of the 7 required confluence points are now fully activated. Michigan's contribution has been particularly valuable. The resonance quality of the vessels prepared by your cell has strengthened the entire northern arc of the pattern. When the final connections are made, the great doorway can be opened, and the Ancient Ones will recognize our offering. Dr. Chen and her team worked for months to catalogue and analyze the Millfield documents, gradually piecing together a picture of an organization whose ambitions went far beyond the grave robbery and murder. uncovered in the original investigation. What emerged from our analysis was the outline of a pseudo-religious cult with elements of 19th century spiritualism, esoteric anatomy, and astronomical obsession, Dr. Chen explained in her preliminary report to the Michigan Historical Society. The Eternal Order appears to have believed that properly prepared human remains, when placed at specific geographical locations, could create a network of what they called resonance points across the continent. These points, when activated through their rituals, would supposedly enable communication with entities they referred to as the Ancient Ones or those who wait beyond. The documents suggested that the Order's activities had been calculated according to astronomical alignments, with major operations timed to coincide with specific celestial events. More disturbing was evidence that their network of vessels had been deliberately placed to form a massive geographical pattern across the United States, with each burial ground serving as a node in this macabre constellation. They were creating a map in human remains, noted Dr. Chen. Each cemetery where they operated contained a similar pattern of falsified burials arranged in a circular formation around a central point. When we plotted these locations across the Midwest, they themselves formed a larger circular pattern around what appears to be a central point somewhere in northern Minnesota. Coincidentally or not, the same area where former Sheriff Blackwood disappeared in 1912. As news of the discovery spread, researchers from other states came forward with evidence of similar cases. In Kenosha, Wisconsin, local historians had uncovered discrepancies in cemetery records dating from 1870 to 1885, the period immediately preceding the Eternal Order's activity in Millfield. In Joliet, Illinois, renovation of an old courthouse had revealed hidden records of an 1860 investigation into a mortician and cemetery caretaker who had fled before they could be questioned about missing bodies. Particularly significant was a connection made by Professor James Blackwood, a criminologist from Northwestern University and great-grandson of Sheriff Thomas Blackwood. The younger Blackwood had inherited a collection of his great-grandfather's personal effects, including journals documenting his unofficial investigation after leaving office. These journals revealed that Thomas Blackwood had continued tracking the Eternal Order until his disappearance, gradually uncovering more of their network and purpose. "I believe they are preparing for something they call the Great Convergence," the former sheriff wrote in his final journal entry, dated November 1912. According to the papers I recovered from the abandoned lodge in Traverse City, they believe that when certain stars align with their network of vessels, a doorway will open between worlds. What lies beyond this doorway I cannot say, but the fanaticism with which they pursue this goal suggests they expect either power or salvation from whatever comes through. Tomorrow I leave for the mining town of Crowley's Ridge. Local reports suggest the Order has established their central operation there, possibly their largest confluence point. If I am right, I may finally meet this architect, who has orchestrated decades of murder across our nation. Thomas Blackwood was never seen again after departing for northern Minnesota. Local authorities at the time recorded that he had likely been caught in an early blizzard and perished in the wilderness. However, his great-grandson's research suggested another possibility, that he had indeed found the Eternal Order's central operation and had been silenced to protect their secrets. The documents from both the Millfield discovery and the Blackwood family archives pointed to a disturbing conclusion. The Eternal Order had been working towards some grand design scheduled to culminate during a specific astronomical alignment. According to their own writings, this alignment would occur when the Wanderer returns to the House of the Water-Bearer, an apparent reference to a planetary transit through the constellation Aquarius. Astronomical experts consulted by Dr. Chen identified several possible interpretations of this reference, with the most likely being the transit of Neptune through Aquarius, an event that occurs approximately every 165 years. The last such transit had begun in 2011 and would continue until 2025. If the Eternal Order still exists in some form, Dr. Chen noted in her final report, their writings suggest they would view the current astronomical period as the culmination of nearly 2 centuries of preparation. The question that haunts me is whether anyone is still carrying forward this great work they described with such devotion. That question was partially answered in January 2023, when authorities investigating the Millfield discovery began cross-referencing the Order's historical pattern of activity with contemporary missing persons cases. What they found sent a chill through law enforcement agencies across the Midwest. Since 2011, there had been a statistically significant increase in disappearances along the same geographical pattern identified in the historical documents. Most involved individuals with few social connections, homeless persons, undocumented immigrants, solitary travelers, precisely the profile of victims the Order had targeted in the past. More disturbing still, several of these disappearances had occurred in proximity to cemeteries or funeral homes, where staff had recently changed or ownership had transferred under unusual circumstances. In March 2023, following months of quiet investigation, FBI agents raided a funeral home in Crowley's Ridge, Minnesota, the same town Thomas Blackwood had been heading toward when he disappeared in 1912. What they discovered in a hidden sub-basement beneath the century-old building confirmed their worst fears. The Eternal Order of the Vessel was not a historical curiosity, but a living organization that had continued its work into the 21st century. The raid uncovered modern laboratory equipment alongside ritual implements matching the descriptions in Simmons' journal. Computer records revealed correspondence between the Crowley's Ridge operation and at least 12 other locations across the United States, suggesting a network that had adapted to the digital age while maintaining its core practices and beliefs. Most significantly, investigators discovered a chamber deep beneath the funeral home that appeared to serve as a modern equivalent to the confluence point described in the historical documents. The room, a perfect circle 33 feet in diameter, contained 13 alcoves arranged around its perimeter, each holding a copper vessel similar to those described in the 1903 investigation. In the center of the room stood a complex apparatus, combining modern electronics with components that appeared much older. Brass instruments, crystal lenses, and mechanisms of unknown purpose crafted with a precision that suggested 19th century craftsmanship. What we found represents a seamless fusion of archaic ritual practice and cutting-edge technology, reported Special Agent Diana Winters, lead investigator on the case. It appears that while the Eternal Order's methods have evolved, their essential purpose has remained consistent for at least 150 years. Their modern communications refer repeatedly to the final phase and completion of the circuit, suggesting they believe their long-term project is nearing its culmination. 4 individuals were arrested during the raid, including the funeral home's owner, Dr. Malcolm Pierce, a name that raised immediate concerns given its similarity to Franklin Pierce, one of the original Millfield conspirators. Subsequent DNA analysis would confirm that Malcolm Pierce was a direct descendant of Franklin Pierce, suggesting that membership in the Order had passed through family lines for generations. When questioned, Pierce maintained the same resolute silence that had characterized the few Order members apprehended in 1903. The only statement he made during his arraignment was cryptic but chilling. "You have found one point of 13. The circuit remains unbroken. The doorway opens regardless of your interference." The great work continues. In the months following the Crowley's Ridge raid, coordinated law enforcement operations targeted suspected Order locations across 7 states. Some raids were successful, uncovering evidence similar to that found in Minnesota and leading to additional arrests. Others found only abandoned sites, suggesting that elements of the network had been warned and had gone into hiding. Most disturbing were locations where investigators arrived to find evidence of hasty departure alongside indications that vessels, presumed to be kidnapped victims, had been processed and relocated just days or even hours before the raids. By December 2023, 37 individuals with connections to the Eternal Order had been identified, with 22 in custody and 15 still at large. Those arrested came from surprisingly diverse backgrounds: funeral directors, medical professionals, astronomers, local government officials, and in one case, a renowned physicist specializing in quantum entanglement theory. Interrogations yielded little information, as most detainees maintained silence or responded only with cryptic references to the great work. However, digital evidence recovered from various locations gradually revealed more about the Order's modern incarnation and current objectives. They've adapted their 19th century beliefs to incorporate quantum theory and advanced neurological concepts, explained Dr. Eliza Sinclair, a forensic psychologist assisting the FBI investigation and, in a strange twist of fate, a distant relative of Dr. Elijah Sinclair who had participated in the original Millfield investigation. Their current doctrine appears to center on the belief that properly preserved human neural tissue, when arranged in specific geographical patterns and stimulated according to precise astronomical timing, can create a network capable of receiving and transmitting information across dimensional boundaries. Email. Correspondence recovered from Malcolm Pierce's computer made repeated references to the signal that the Order had allegedly detected emanating from what they called the other side. According to these communications, the Order believed they were in contact with entities that existed beyond conventional reality, entities that had promised to share knowledge and power in exchange for assistance in creating a stable doorway between worlds. What began as a 19th century spiritualist cult appears to have evolved into something that views itself as engaged in a form of extreme theoretical physics, noted Dr. Sinclair. The terrifying aspect is that they've maintained the same brutal methodology, human sacrifice and organ harvesting, but now justify it with pseudo-scientific rationalizations about neural networks and quantum consciousness rather than purely spiritual concepts. As 2024 began, the investigation into the Eternal Order continued, with law enforcement working to identify and apprehend remaining members, while researchers studied the recovered materials to better understand the organization's true capabilities and intentions. The pattern of their confluence points had been mapped across the United States, revealing a design that, when viewed from above, resembled a massive circuit board or antenna array centered on the northern Minnesota location. In February 2024, astronomers noted that Neptune had entered the precise position in Aquarius described in the Order's historical documents as the moment of convergence. That same night, power outages were reported at dozens of locations corresponding to known or suspected Order sites, including all facilities where detained members were being held. When power was restored hours later, 4 high-security detainees, including Malcolm Pierce, were found missing from their cells, despite no evidence of forced entry or exit at any facility. The manhunt for the escaped Order members continues to this day, alongside efforts to locate and secure any remaining confluence points before they can be activated. Law enforcement bulletins describe the fugitives as extremely dangerous and potentially assisted by an extensive network of fanatical supporters. Meanwhile, in Millfield, Michigan, where this century-spanning mystery began, residents report strange phenomena centered around Oakwood Cemetery: unexplained lights, electronic equipment malfunctions, and a persistent low-frequency hum that seems to emanate from the ground itself, particularly in the northern section, where the original investigation uncovered the first evidence of the Order's activities. Local authorities, working with federal investigators, have placed the cemetery under constant surveillance, but no unusual activity has been detected by human observers or electronic monitoring equipment. Nevertheless, longtime residents avoid the area after dark, and parents warn their children to stay away from the Old North section, where weathered gravestones bear names that, thanks to Harold Whitman's discovery more than a century ago, are now known to be false markers for unidentified victims. There's something still active there, insists Eleanor Whitman, great-granddaughter of the township clerk who found the hidden ledger. You can feel it when you walk past the cemetery gates, a vibration more than a sound, like something humming just below the threshold of hearing. My family has felt it for generations. Whatever my great-grandfather uncovered in 1903, it wasn't just a series of murders. It was the beginning of something that hasn't ended yet.